This is The Instigators, presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
We are going to overtime!
There's no question, it is the season of overtime. The Stanley Cup Playoffs is always heightened by games that go beyond regulation time. Marty, we're going to dive a little deeper into, the stories that get told through these games, whether they're 60 minutes or a lot longer. And we're going to do so with Emily Kaplan of ESPN coming up. It's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? When it shifts from regular season to playoffs, you have different national people following the series and in essence, kind of following you around, establishing new relationships.
And the longer you go, the more you get to know them and the more they get to know you. So quick story, when OLN was the national broadcaster and we played Carolina in 2006, Bob Hartwood was the rinkside reporter and
my co-host at Leafs
your
TV.
co-host at Leafs TV. Absolutely. And so he comes to me in between periods. He says, Marty, we got that great clip of you talking to Eric Stahl and chirping him about the penalty that, Jay McKee took and Stahl went down. Can we use it? And I had gotten to know Bob a little bit. So I'm like, absolutely. If you think it's fine, go ahead. Like, it's the trust that you get with these reporters now, because you've been spending 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks with them. So, yeah, I think you forge new relationships and you get to know them better.
The real reason that you established a relationship with Bob Harwood is because he parlez-vous français.
I'm
I thought he was pretty good at it.
No, he's really good. I'm just saying that is a small part of the
reason.
relationship.
Yes, a small reason for sure. And I would say this based on everything you just said. For me, I was lucky to cover my first Stanley Cup final in '97. It was the Wings and the Flyers. And I was not following them around the entire time, but just landed in the final. But in some strange way, was able to establish a good rapport and trust with Doug Brown, seemingly, of the Red Wings. And I will never forget being in the room when they won. You remember what it was like at the old Joe. Like, it's chaotic, right? And there's a million cameras, there's nowhere to move. And as he sees me, trying to get to him for an interview, like, he reaches over top of somebody and like grabs my coat and like pulls me into the chaotic scrum. And it's just funny how you just feel like you can trust people and ask them, pertinent questions and most importantly, get really good answers about the game and everything that's going on. So when you're serious about the game, bet on Buffalo, the only sports books in Western New York. Seneca Resorts and Casinos betting counters are open daily, and self-serving betting kiosks are available 24/7 at all 3 locations. So whether you visit Seneca Niagara, Allegheny, or Buffalo Creek, the Sports Lounge features the latest lines and multiple screens, so you never miss a play. The Sports Book at Seneca Resorts and Casinos, where the love of the game meets the thrill of the win. Marty, there's no question that Emily Kaplan has been, involved in some really great individual moments with players who've been shining brightly in these Stanley Cup playoffs. Emily, what has it been like for you here in this season on ESPN to now be in the Stanley Cup playoffs and talking with these players through the highest of highs and lowest of lows as far as we are right now? I know it's only round 1.
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. And honestly, I feel like a rookie right now that's just getting the most incredible ride of their life. Being able to be part of these broadcasts for ESPN and ABC in this first year of our new rights deal. But I do feel very fortunate with the platform that I'm given, that I get to talk to the guys who are the stars of the game or who have big important moments and share their stories with the audience. Something that we feel really strongly about at ESPN is a way to grow the sport is through storytelling. And that's something that's really important to me. So one of the things that I've just been focusing on with these interviews is kind of building narratives around guys. I'm sure we'll talk about Louis Domingue and his spicy pork and maybe some of the follow-ups to that. But it's even in Carolina, that's a team that I've covered a lot. We were there at game 1. I just flew in them from their game last night. And, the identity of Rod Brind'Amour, all the different personalities of the team, how they all meld together under his identity. And a perfect example is Seth Jarvis. That's a kid that I really didn't know much about before the season. He comes in, all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, he's actually making the roster. And now he has 3 playoff goals, including 2 last night. And just kind of introducing him. And so it's just been a blast. I'm really enjoying it. I'm totally rambling on because if you guys can't tell, running on empty right now. I'm on a rookie deal with unlimited call-ups, so they're working me crazy.
Well, that's kind of like one thing I wanted to ask, because people don't realize that, but you've been going back and forth between series. So what is, like, let's just say the last 5 days, what has your travel schedule been like? Because you're not being flown in on a private jet like Charlie McAvoy to play the game. Like, you're going airport to airport.
No PJs for this girl. Yeah. So let's see. It began Sunday. I had a game in Boston on Mother's Day that afternoon. After that, I flew to Pittsburgh that night. I had a game in Pittsburgh on Monday. Then I flew Tuesday to Raleigh. I had a game there, and you see me pausing because sometimes me and Ray Ferraro were just at baggage claim, and we're like, what plane did we come in from? Where are we? What city is this? After Raleigh, I just flew to New York here. So that's 4 games in 4 days. I think I did that right. It's been a little nutty, and it's been interesting because we're toggling between series. So, you get to see the identity of each series, and you kind of compare and contrast them at a very intimate level. But it is sometimes kind of hard to keep track and just remembering, all of the nuances of series unless you're, following it that intimately.
This is a tricky one based on the fact we've established the newness of the deal for ESPN and ABC. And your role prior to this was certainly a little different as a reporter than what you're in now. But have you felt like, and again, COVID protocols and everything play into this too, have you felt like you've been able to make these inroads all year long with players and with teams? And do you feel that now that you're in these moments? Like, do you feel a genuine good awareness from the players and the teams because of the network that you're on this season?
For sure. I mean, so I've covered hockey since 2017 for ESPN, but it was 90% for ESPN.com. I get an occasional Sports Center hit here or there. I appear on a show called Around the Horn. I get so excited when we get a hockey topic in there. It's usually in the C block, and it's usually like one yes or no question, go. So I feel like for the last 4 years, I've been putting in the work, and I'm at the rink, and I'm talking to guys, and I'm building these relationships with the players, the coaches, the agents, the management staffs, because I'm so passionate about hockey. I still carry that passion. I'm just given this new platform of visibility. And it's so interesting how all of a sudden people are like, where did this girl come from? I'm like, I've been here the whole time. It's just, you realize that TV does carry that, that visibility and that extra platform. And, so the stories that I feel like I've always wanted to tell and did tell, I just get to tell them to a much larger audience. My biggest issue, honestly, is that I like to tell really nuanced stories. And I'm a writer by trade. My first job was with Sports Illustrated. If I'm writing a story about Marty Biron, I want to write 4,000 words about who he is and just how sparkling his blue eyes are and really capture that. But on TV, I only get 20 seconds, which is really difficult to distill all that down. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. But it's funny, I'm at the rink in Pittsburgh the other night, walking out with Ray Ferraro, and I see Chris Drury and goes, hi, Ray, hi, Emily. And I'm thinking to myself, I've never talked to Chris Drury. I've requested to interview him like 5 times this year. He's been so coy, but he knows exactly who I am. And that's a little bit of a, sorry, I'm going to curse for a second, mind, because, it's a weird position to be in, to be this visible.
Agreed.
But you have to be ready and prepared for the unexpected. And so game 1 between the Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins, they end up in triple overtime, but in this double overtime, Casey Smith comes out, Louis Domingue comes in, they win, you get to interview him after. So unlike writing and thinking about your questions, you're put on the spot. And I'll give you props, because when he said he had dinner between the first and second overtime, you asked him what was for dinner, and then you got the great quote. So how did that feel after you got the quote? Is your phone blowing up from friends saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe you got him to say spicy pork and broccoli? And was it just unreal?
It was pretty crazy. Yeah. I knew it was a fun moment. I just didn't realize how fun. And of course, when you have that big of a stage, Madison Square Garden, triple overtime, unknown goalie who comes in against the New York Rangers, that gets shared everywhere. And so, yeah, honestly, the weirdest part to me was arriving the next day, because it was one of those situations where we go fly. We had a game the next day in Raleigh, and walking into the rink in Raleigh, and all these security guards I started to get to know, and all the people in the truck are like, great interview, hilarious, spicy pork and broccoli. And like, whoa, everyone saw this, and that's pretty cool. And, it's funny because I got to interview Louis the other night. Again, he's been such an incredible story. And I said, Louis, that game was a couple days ago, and still anyone and their mother wants to talk about spicy pork and broccoli. Like the Pittsburgh Penguins have added it to their, concession menu. Like, what do you make of all of this mania? And he's like, you guys are crazy. Like, this is weird. And I'm like, it is crazy, and we are crazy, but all we really want is some relatability, right? And we want a connectivity to these athletes. And he just said something that was just so relatable. We all need to eat. We all sometimes eat something. You're like, oh, that wasn't the best choice there. And just his natural reaction, as you know, Marty, goalies are the best, specifically French goalies are the best. So he's a beauty. All the credit to him.
Well, I'll tell you this. He's got a cookbook. He's a good cook. He likes to be in the kitchen. So the whole story kind of connected the dots, and it was really cool to put that loop all around it. And you did a great job. So that was amazing.
It reminds me of when we had the, Red Wings Penguins era of Stanley Cup finals. And while the food choice was very expected, which was pizza, as overtimes continue, the best was when Peter Sikora, in the house of the Illiches, owners of Little Caesars, talked about the fact that, when he ate between periods in what was a triple overtime game, he said pizza, and then he added from Domino's.
Oh man.
So just to get the dig in, and we all appreciate guys that are aware of the moment and can still be themselves, which is the humorous side, which people really love. Beyond this Louis Domingue story, what other ones have you enjoyed telling or are on the cusp of telling?
That's a good one. We have a piece that's coming out. We previewed it on The Point, and it's gonna air in full this week on Jordan Bennington. And he was just really vulnerable and opened up about his journey, because it's been such a roller coaster for him to go from, this guy that was almost persona non grata in the Blues organization to being the hero when they win their first ever Stanley Cup. But then also what happens after that. And I think a lot of times, when we tell the story of athletes, it's always the hero's journey and the rise, and not necessarily the fall, but this is someone who's in a position where he doesn't necessarily know where his career is going to go. And to be so open to talking about being in that moment, I thought was really special. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that story. If the Panthers keep doing well, you're going to see an awesome story on Scott Mellenby, reflecting back on the rat year and the rat trick. And if you don't know it, just wait, because it's so good. And he was just so introspective and interesting about what it all means, bigger picture, why we still care about the stupid rats they threw on the ice or the bloodstained wall that was in that locker room all these years later, and how you build a team and how you build momentum and stories and narratives around the team. So that one is cool. And then, just some of the in-game interviews. Like I'm really grateful that I've gotten to know a lot of guys in this job. And like a great example was the other night in Boston, or day, I think that was a day game. It was that Sunday game. Ian Cole is a player that I've always enjoyed chatting with. And, when we request these interviews, it's typically, the star player or, the 1, 2, or 3 star. He's a defenseman who's probably best known for killing penalties and being on their top penalty killing unit. But I knew that if I asked for him, he would give me a good interview. And he just gave such great answers. It was, after a controversial goalie interference call, the Canes obviously disagreed with it. He gave his opinion there. It was his 100th career playoff game. He kind of just reflected on what he's learned in, from the first game he played into then. So those are some of the stories that I love, and I'm proud to be able to share with the audience.
Do you make predictions? And I'm asking because Bob McKenzie up in Canada always says, I don't make predictions because I don't want to cheer for my predictions to be correct in the end. And as a, neutral writer or a reporter, you kind of have to see both sides. So did you make predictions entering the playoffs?
So I would love to be like Bob McKenzie's stature and to say, no, I don't do it because I can't, but work makes us all email it in. So I did do predictions. I will say I do have rooting interest. It's so unfair or unrealistic to say you don't, but the things that I root for are the people and the stories. And they're good people that I've met in this game. I want to see them succeed, and I want to see them find their fulfillment, and I want to share good stories. So like when I have a good story in the bank, I'm like, oh, I hope that player does well or that team does well so that we can air it at this time.
So 40 years from now, when you're still dominating this business as an insider and storyteller, like Bob McKenzie has, who has now shifted into branding and alcoholic beverages like Bobby Margarita, what would be your beverage that is all Emily Kaplan that you would promote?
Oh, great question. Everyone who's been on the road with me knows my go-to order is a scotch and soda after a game. I know it's kind of a weird one. And then they all make fun of me because they're like, what kind of scotch? I'm like, oh, whatever's well. I don't really care that much. So whatever's well scotch, maybe that could be my branding, just kind of non-fussy. I'm also big on coconut water for hydration.
Nice.
That has been my recovery tool. So
let me guess, you and Weeksy share that.
yes. I love that guy. Yeah, I didn't know that he was a big coconut guy, but water guy, but that is good to know. And he's such a business guy. I should probably call him and figure out something.
Weeksy, a business guy, no kidding. He's got a side deal for everything. But again, so you talk about the relationship now with ESPN and being able to bring in all these new reporters and analysts with the group. And you talk about Ray Ferraro. We had Cammie on the pod earlier this year. She told us some race stories. So I feel like, and we have Darren Dreger on the radio show every Friday, and he does a podcast with Ray. So we get a lot of race stories. So anyone that you would care to share about Ray Ferraro and what it's been like with him the last few days?
I love Ray. I really appreciate him. And I think he's been such a champion for women. And part of that is, just due to his respect for Cammie and the way he talks about Cammie, I just respect so much, but he just really makes me feel like an inclusive part of the team, but so much so that he loves chirping me. Once he realized that I was someone that didn't get easily offended, it like became the greatest day of his life. We were at a game in like Philly, I don't know, it was probably December or January. And I am texting, walking into the gym, and I walk into the glass door. He told no less than 8 people that day. We go to our coaches meeting. Hey, you know what Emily did today? She walked into the glass door. So my favorite Ray Ferraro story is today, actually, because we came to New York. I'm a Jersey girl. I booked the travel and I'm like, hey, we're flying to Newark. I think that's a better option to get to the West Side. And he goes, oh my God, this is going to be a mess. There's no way. Let me tell you guys, it was the easiest travel day we ever had. Got out there, bags were hand delivered, taxi was waiting, 30 minutes door to door. We're here at the hotel now. So eat that, Ray.
Oh, I love it. That is so good. Ray is such a good person. It's and I would say, I mean, what's great about everything you said is because it's super important with the growth of the game, the coverage of the game. I just find him to be just inclusive in general, right?
Yes.
Like he is just that type of person. And that's not to say there aren't a lot of people like him, but boy, the world would be better if there were a lot more. It's
totally. And he has a natural curiosity, which I think has allowed him to evolve. And that speaks to his longevity. And I also have to be careful, by the way, because his hotel room is like right next to mine right now. We're in a New York hotel. I don't think these are very thick walls. So he's probably listening, rolling his eyes to this entire thing. But anyway, the natural curiosity of, asking questions, getting different voices, not straying away from international player. He was just telling me in the cab ride over here that like he's missing the Worlds this year, and that was his favorite event because he just loves talking to people in all different countries, and all with a passion for hockey, but all look at it from a different point of view and different perspective. So I really do appreciate that about him, and that's why you see him on the biggest stage for the biggest networks because he's just awesome.
He's so good, Marty, right? I mean,
Ray's awesome. And he's easygoing. He's sarcastic. He's witty. He's smart. He does everything. And so when I worked with, and I still do some stuff with Ray, obviously at TSN, but there's always a competition between TSN and Sportsnet because, you're the two networks in Canada and they used to share the national rights, and then Sportsnet got it. And now TSN is kind of doing just regional things. So is there a competition between you guys and TNT and Turner because of the fact and who is the biggest antagonist in that whole competition?
I think it's behind the scenes a lot. Like we're really competitive. And look, anyone who's in sports, I think has a natural competitive side to them. But like great example, like we've been doing The Point, our studio show all year, and it's a fantastic show and it's so fun. And the first show ever, they bring out chicken parm for Bucci, John Bucci Gross, because he loves it. And after every show, I don't understand how they do it. they bring out chicken parm, and now they bring out food. And then after the spicy pork and broccoli, which was an interview that aired on our network, they come out for the TNT studio show and wheel out some spicy pork and broccoli. And people at ESPN are livid. They're like, they stole our idea. This is bull. I'm like, okay, guys, I get it. Like, people eat, it's fine. But that type of competitiveness, I do appreciate. But at the end of the day, like, I have so much respect for so many people who work there and the product that they do. And like, a great example, like Eddie Olczyk texted me in the game last night, and I think he texted Ray too, just like, great job, keep it up. And that to me just speaks to the hockey community as a whole, because we can be competitive, but it's a great community.
I almost feel like I remember our camera guy being so happy that our shot on the off day, like Sports Center hit at TSN, was a way better shot than what Sportsnet had done. And he was so happy, like, we got a better location, a better shot. I feel like these are the people that compete, right? Like the producers and the camera guys and the sound guys, like they're like, our job was better than theirs. Like, they're really on display that way.
Totally. And like, we talked about the visibility, like, I'm talking about the grind that I'm on. They're working just as hard. And those guys and gals deserve so much credit, because, you know, you don't see their names and see their faces all the time, but they work just as hard. And you're right, they're just as competitive. And I'm sure once, I think we got the better Charlie McAvoy entrance video yesterday than anybody else. So our camera guys probably took some pride in that.
Now, what made it better, Emily?
The only one. I didn't see it anywhere else.
Okay, there you go. Exclusivity is key. No question about that.
You were in the right spot, though. You were talking to Bruce Cassidy at that time, and he walked in, right? If I was correct.
Yeah, and it's funny because I know Charlie's one of the guys I know, and so I texted him that day. I was like, "Hey, Charlie, like, I want to talk about you on the broadcast tonight of just, you know, where you'll be watching, what it's been like to watch from home." He didn't text me back, and I was like, kind of pissed. And then so he walks in. He's wearing this N95. He's got the smile, and he just goes, "Sorry to text you back." And just keeps walking by. So he's back in my good graces.
That's so good. Now you painted the picture of your work with ESPN before now, and being on this platform. How would you say it's gone? And like, what were you feeling when ESPN got the rights? And, you know, so take us through this evolutionary year for you, and what you've enjoyed, what you've feared in certain moments. I think we all feel some of that in this business.
Yeah, I think my fear is more rooted in imposter syndrome. And I think that's a really common thing for young people who get into this business, specifically young women, where you feel like, do I deserve to be here? And I've really had to develop a lot of confidence and realizing, yes, I did put in the work. Yes, I do deserve to be here. And yes, I add value. And I kind of have to remind myself that often. You know, when we got the rights, again, I was a writer and I was hoping for more opportunities. You know, maybe they'll have me on SportsCenter more. I asked the bosses, you know, sideline reporting is something I'd really love to try. And, you know, if you could try me out in a couple of broadcasts, that'd be great. Opening night, I was between the benches in Tampa Bay when they're raising the banner against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And to me, like, that's just a pinch me moment. Like, how did I land here? And, you know, it's been a learning experience because TV is still relatively new to me. And I still kind of figuring it out. And it's tough to have those growing pains, especially live TV, live broadcasts, when you do have this big stage and so many people see it. That said, like, it's all about the reps. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to get so many regular reps. And I'm just enjoying the ride. And I don't necessarily know if my imposter syndrome is as bad as it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I think it keeps getting better and better with confidence. And you know, I just think for any young person out there, it's just reminding yourself that if you do put in the work, you do deserve to be there.
And you are covering hockey a ton right now, but you mentioned the show Around the Horn. You'll talk about everything. And do you still have to keep up on what's happening in the NBA playoffs right now, through the NFL and the draft and all of that and do you still do the show now, or is it kind of put aside for hockey right now?
I put it aside the last few weeks. I honestly just didn't even have any days I could do it. Like there's no opportunity. And I love the producers. They're so patient with me. I covered the NFL before I covered hockey. So I always feel like I've got a pretty good pulse on what's going on in that league. And I have people that I can call that can kind of fill me in. NBA is a struggle. I mean, it's the same exact season, the playoffs. Like, I don't think I could tell you the teams that are still in it right now. Like I can, but
I couldn't, but
No.
that's not my job. But still, like, I mean, I'm a sports guy. I like it, but I couldn't tell you who's in there.
Have you
Totally.
forgotten?
No, it's tough.
Have you Have you forgotten something this year? Like it just, you went right past it because you're so busy with work, whether it's, a personal milestone, a family birthday, another significant sporting event. You're like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that happened.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific example, but I do feel like this year has been a whirlwind, and I'm like, I couldn't tell you what I did for Christmas this year. I'll give you that. Like,
Yeah.
Everything has just been a blur, and it's been awesome. But, there are sacrifices with this job, especially when you're working as much as I am. And I can't tell you how many weddings and birthdays and mostly bachelorette trips. I feel like I've only gone to one. So probably for the better for my liver, but
if Nashville had extended their series, you would have undoubtedly ran into another bachelorette party while you were there, right?
Just joined in.
Hey, I will say this. The reason I kind of asked you the question, because it was top of mind just a couple of days ago, first time ever, I completely forgot about the Kentucky Derby, like had no clue that it was on. And I'm like, how is that even possible? So we do all get wrapped up in whatever else is.
You know what? The Derby was fun because that was my one and only off day. Saturday in Boston was actually my birthday. Actually, great example because Sophia from Nesson, she was like, let's all get together. We'll watch the Celtics game. It's a big game. I was like, oh, the Celtics are still in it. Okay. And then afterwards it switches to horse racing. And I'm like, I know that the Derby is always around my birthday. I just didn't think of it to be today. So yeah, the Derby was a good example.
I want to go forward a little bit as to you're thinking ahead to the finals, right? You guys have the finals this year with ESPN.
We do.
So are you preparing already? Like some people would say, I'm preparing my outfits. I'm preparing, like I would have my suits, and Duffer, you'd be the same. Don't lie. Like I'd have my suits like prepared. I'd say game 1, game 2, game 3, and the rotation would already be in production right now. Where are you, the excitement level for saying Stanley Cup finals on ESPN, and you obviously at the forefront of telling the stories?
Okay, I'm not as conscious about my fashion as you, clearly. Also, I have a question. How do you pace it out? Because you probably want your best outfit for a game 7, but you don't know if you're going to have a game 7.
I don't space it out. I basically, and my one daughter is really good in organizing things. She went in my closet one day and put my shirts on one side, my suit. And she says, when you take a suit, take it from the left. And then when you're done wearing it, if you don't have to dry clean it, put it on the right side, and then you kind of work your way through. But sometimes there's one that's like 3 games from now that I'm like, I really want that one today. So that's kind of my system right now. But Duffer's the fashion expert. You should ask him.
I have too many. No, not too many. That's wrong. I have a lot of choices. I feel very confident in almost all of them.
Great.
And I am always looking for a deal. Nordstrom Rack is probably my most used app, and you tend to get things delivered really quick. And once you know your size, it usually pays off and you don't have to get too many alterations. So
this is great. The Nordy Rack app. I'm about to download it. But no, we're like, to answer your original question, Marty, like we're all so pumped. Like this is something, again, you kind of just have to pinch yourself and saying, we're broadcasting the Stanley Cup on ESPN. I get to be a part of it. And, we all know the history and just the gravitas that winning the cup carries, and just being able to be part of documenting that moment for the masses is something that, again, like I haven't really been able to look that far ahead, but I know when I'm in the moment, it's going to be pretty cool.
Hey, you mentioned being opening night between the benches. Have you had any incidents down there between the benches this year?
No, I haven't. It's funny. Like I kept joking to everyone, and I wasn't really joking that I wanted a black eye because I thought it would give me some cred. And every hockey player I told that to was like, no, you don't. No, you don't. So then I told the guys that I'm like, just slap a soft one to me. Like, I'll figure it out. So no, like I've been very safe, head on a swivel. The refs and linesmen are really good about making sure I put my phone away and stay focused, and I'm not texting in there because as I told you the story of me walking into a glass wall, I don't necessarily have the best spatial awareness all the time.
You can talk to John Giannone. He had a pretty good black eye the one year.
Oh, yeah.
There's been many guys and gals, and I don't know. Oh, we just are going to get
I'm so
Emily
sorry.
back
I'm
with the
so
screen.
sorry.
But
All
no,
good.
that's part of the hazard of the job. Sometimes you got to get quick response, and then boop, it comes
I
up.
know. It was a text. It was about the game tonight. It was a report. I was just going to like a text. I thought it was being played, but damn iPad.
It's no
Multitasking.
problem. It's multitasking. But the best part of it all is how to get back to your screens. Most people would be like, what do I do now? What do I press? How do I get there? So
Now, why would you throw Craig Ramsey under the bus like that?
Oh, that's not Rammer's fault. He had too many cases of beers next to him after winning a medal at the Olympics. But anyway, what I was saying is that you see, it used to be just guys that played the game that were between the benches, right? And now you see this not only go to all gender, but also not just former players, reporters, different people in between the benches. And what does that give you more, either accessibility to sounds on the ice or a better look? What does between the benches for you make the difference from being in the press box or anywhere else?
Oh, it was everything. It's the coolest thing that I've ever gotten to do in my entire life. And every time I get an opportunity to be there, I just feel so grateful. There's no vantage point like it. And you're right. Like, one of the things that was so neat about me being able to do it on opening night is, there's been a typecast of this role of, it's typically an analyst and a former player. There's never been someone with my background or who looks like me or sounds like me, who's been down there. And that's one of the reasons that my bosses wanted to do it, is because they said, you've never been there. You'll notice things that maybe the people who've been there all the time just take for granted. And that's the things that the audience wants to hear, right? Because that's the things that they're curious about. So that, I just feel very blessed for that opportunity. And, you have just a new appreciation for the speed of the game, the skill, the physicality, how clever some of the chirps are, how honestly just juvenile some of them are. They sound like 5-year-olds a lot of the time. You get a new appreciation for the way the officials have relationships with the coaches and players, and the way they manage the game, not the way that people manage the game in a negative connotation. And it's given me a ton of story ideas, which is another thing that I'm appreciative of, because it's just helped my coverage.
So as we sit here in this moment, and every podcast for the most part becomes dated very quickly, but we'll live in the moment anyway. As you're sitting here talking to us, what are the biggest stories so far in these playoffs?
For me, it's the unlikely goalie, the surprise goalie. And just, if we're thinking of one trend, it's just how many players have been thrust into this position, and, how many starters have been out, and the way they've carried their teams. So, Louis Domingue might be the poster child for that, but there's so many guys out there making less than $1 million, just busting their ass every night. And it's really inspiring to see too, because as you know, it's such a specialized position. There's only 32 spots that that get to fill it really in a year, maybe 64. A lot of teams have tandems, but the fact that there's so many guys that are grinding, waiting for that opportunity, to know that you can have that opportunity and the door can open as long as you stay ready, I think is pretty cool.
I think goaltender interference has been one. So how about a trip to the situation room and gonna get a feel for all of that? I'm sure you guys have experienced it, and through being able to visit in the off season and whatnot. But I think that's been one for me that people and fans, and maybe it's bias from organization or fan base to fan base, has been a pretty big story as well.
Oh, no, totally. Just to build off that, Marty, though, like, we get to have these meetings with the coaches off the record before games, and almost every coach has had an opinion on it, that they hate it. And they hate that the onus is on them for such a subjective call, right? Mm-hmm. Because if it's offside, like, okay, you're either right or you're wrong if you challenge it, like we can see, but goalie interference is so subjective. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see a reform because of what we've seen in the playoffs this year. So you had the better answer than me.
Okay, well, how about this? And I know he's on a different, network, but Charles Barkley had a great idea, and I want to get both of your opinions on it. He said, I feel like coaches should have one free coaches challenge that doesn't have a penalty attached to it. So if you get it right, then you still have your free coaches challenge. But once you get it wrong, you lose it, and then the next one comes a penalty. And I was sitting there, I'm like, why didn't I think of this? Like, Charles. But maybe somebody told him. But anyway,
spent a lot of time with Wayne in his life, so
probably. But I'm just saying, like, is this something like that type of reform you think, or you would think would do with Coach's Challenge?
Yeah, and Charles, like you said, he spent time with Wayne. Maybe Wayne's hearing from someone. I've heard a coach suggest that this week. A coach who's in the playoffs saying that's what they would like to see too. So maybe that's one solution to it. I'm curious because, I cover the NFL. To me, this is the same situation we had with catch or no catch. And it was just driving people nuts, just like the subjectivity of it. And it's hard because it's such an important call to make, but it is affecting games of the way you're challenging it and the way it's called.
Well, that leads me to when you're talking about a freebie, so to speak, Marty, is that still within the same parameters of what is allowed to be challenged, or are you seeing, are you talking about something that would widen the scope a little bit more?
No, within what is allowed to be challenged. I don't think we want to go and start challenging a lot of other things now. You're pretty much exhausting all the options. But again, as we've seen between Montreal and Philly, a good thing that it wasn't a game that was, with playoff implications. Sometimes the referees don't even know the rules. So Emily, between the benches, is there ever a referee that came to you and said, hey, don't write about how we call too many penalties or too few penalties, or the standard has changed and whatnot? Like, have you had a good exchange with a referee there?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily between the benches, but I've gotten to know them a bit just being around the rink and having the same kind of travel schedule. And they are pretty, I think the biggest shame, honestly, is that they're not allowed to speak to the media. And I understand the reasons why, but I just feel like if you hear them and you listen to them and you understand their job and their role, you have a different appreciation for them and you understand things a lot better. And, one of the things that they're adamant about is we're instructed by Gary Bettman and Stephen Walkom, the director of officiating, to call the standard. And whether it's in the first 5 minutes of the game or 5 minutes into overtime, call the same thing. We're not instructed to put the whistles away. We, all of these narratives that are out there, and managing the game is another one they're pretty big on. It's we don't walk out feeling good of oh, that was a great call game. 3 penalties on this side, 3 penalties on that side. We walk away if it's 6 penalties on this side and 0 on that side, but those were the calls. We feel good about ourselves. Managing the game is more so when they're acting like traffic cop, parent, psychologists, separating all of these little scrums, and having to sometimes assess a penalty just to manage the emotions in the game or talk people down. So yeah, I've definitely had those conversations, and I try to bring a different level of empathy because I do really feel like they are the underappreciated stewards of the game.
Matthews winning in the first round, McDavid losing in the first round. What would be the bigger story?
I think it would just, that's tough. I just think for Toronto as a whole, getting out of the first round, that's the elephant off their back. Obviously the goal is to win the Stanley Cup, but they've got to do something. And McDavid, I just feel like if it happens, it's just again, it's the same story we've been having. And I know it's the Maple Leafs, but it just doesn't have the longevity of torture for it. So we'll go Matthews.
Man, I was going to try this. That's usually my segment, the this or that's there. Duffer kind of sprung that out here, which I absolutely appreciate, Duffer. Okay, well, goaltending story. Louis Domingue continuing on his path and of success, or Antti Ranta, in Carolina having a chance to go all the way to the finals. Which one would be eventually the better goalie story?
Oh, for sure, Domingue, because Antti Ranta has been a guy in this league for many years, and it's just kind of a shame that he never was in a position to be on a playoffs team. But the reason they signed him is for this veteran assurance, because they knew, if something did happen to Freddie, which it did, they could rely on him. Domingue, you don't expect him to be in these moments. It's just, they're down to their third stringer. They sign him, he plays the entire season in the AHL. To a lot of people, he was not even a name entering the season. So he's the bigger story to me.
More surprising, John Quick winning a round, Marc-Andre Fleury losing a round.
I think it would be John Quick winning. And the only reason I say that is that the Blues just had the Wild's number. They were 9-0-1 against them entering the playoffs. So I just had a hard time picking the Wild in that series, knowing that fact. And obviously I love that team. I love what they've built. It feels like if they lose that series, it was just because of the really challenging first round opponent.
Absolutely.
26 goalies have been used in the playoffs so far. Are we going to see 30? There was 119 in the regular season. We still haven't seen Cam Tell, but I'm not saying we're going to see him in game 6 either. But there's still a lot of options left out there for goaltenders. Are we going to get to 30?
I think so. And Freddie Anderson's another guy we haven't seen. It looks like the Canes are going to win that series. He should be available. Tristan Jarry is making his way back. It looks like the Penguins are going to move on. So I like 30. I think we're going to get there, and including one guy that no one's ever heard of.
Who is?
I don't know. I haven't heard of him.
Here we thought you were teasing. Oh, okay. Well, last one. We normally wrap this up, Emily, with, kind of Marty and I looking back at the last week and our 3 stars, but it's impossible to do that now because every single night we're, being blitzed with incredible NHL stories. So it's not as timely. So we want to utilize your expertise and have you help project, looking kind of crystal ball here, what you see as 3 significant off-season stories in the NHL.
So I think the biggest one is going to be in Pittsburgh, the Core's last dance. And they've been trying to stray away from this narrative. But the truth is, Malkin and Letang have their contracts up. So does Brian Rust. And I don't believe the contract talks have gone really well yet. And I think that they're really far apart on sides on term and money. And unless there's significant movement, like there's a legitimate chance that neither of those guys are Penguins anymore. And this is clearly an end of an era. So that to me is number one. Number two would be just how many head coaching vacancies there are. We're going to be talking about who's going where. It's always the dance. Barry Trotz was the big stunner the other day. But that's going to be a huge story. And then lastly, I'm based in Chicago, and at this point, I think I would be surprised if both Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews are on the roster to begin next season. I think both of them have been fiercely loyal to the organization. Both of them have not asked out yet and weren't ready. But just seeing how long this rebuild is going to take, seeing where they're at in their careers, and maybe an opportunity to win one more cup, I wouldn't be shocked if those conversations happen over the summer. So whether they're there or not, it's going to be a story.
If it was Patrick Kane, and I'm sorry for the follow-up, but we are a Buffalo fan based type of program. And if it was Patrick Kane to move, would you see a fit in Buffalo, where obviously he's from? And Kevin Adams has said, we want people that want to be here. I would think if he's going to be on the move, maybe Buffalo would be a fit.
Yeah, so he has a little control, right? Because he has a no movement clause. I think the opportunity to play at home would be really special. I think, the way Buffalo ended its season with all of that momentum, and you realize that the foundation is there for them to be a very good team, maybe sooner than a lot of people think, would be enticing. I also think the New York Rangers, though, and the only reason I say that, it's not because he's Showtime, it's because he believes the best line mate he ever played with his entire career is Artemi Panarin, and a chance to reunite with him in this young team playing on Broadway. Yes, that is some enticing. That might make some sense too.
Yeah, I can imagine Ranger fans wouldn't be too disappointed if, they ultimately had to cut ties with Ryan Strome and then use that money towards bringing in Patrick Kane. So something to watch for sure. Emily, this has gone, like your season, above and beyond our expectations. It has been absolutely amazing to have you on, and continued success. We really, really enjoy everything you're doing with ESPN.
Thank you, guys. I'm such a big fan of both of you. This is such a cool podcast, so I really appreciate you asking me.
Well, we couldn't do it, Marty, without our great friends at Seneca Resorts and Casinos. So we thank them once again, and we'll see you next week on Instigators Overtime.